Once again, liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov brutally triggered some of her co-hosts when she brutally fact-checked MAGA Republicans' despicable lies about the Biden-Harris administration's response to Hurricane Helene. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. And by the way, thanks for helping me get to 400,000 subscribers. I appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. And I should say, I actually tried to record this video on Saturday before I traveled to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to help canvass and attend actually a Trump rally. I'll probably do a video on that as well. Got through the entire video and realized I never hit record, so should probably do that next time. Anyway, here's Jessica Tarlov once again laying the smack down on her MAGA co-host with a brutal fact check that MAGA Republicans desperately need to heed.
Really, Marco Rubio didn't like something, so he said that it was fake. And the reality is, and I mentioned this yesterday on The Five, that every accusation is a confession from the Republicans. You know, the only president who actually did take funds that were supposed to go to disaster relief and move them to dealing with the border, that was Donald Trump. He took $155 million out of the FEMA budget to do that. That should have gone to hurricane relief.
A couple of things.
So I'm not sure. So yeah, you hear Brian Kilmeade, and they say Brian. I can recognize his voice, Brian Kilmeade. I think the other person talking was Martha McCallum. It might have been Dana Perino. But obviously they objected. They were very upset by Jessica Tarlov's fact check, because once again, we're hearing just verifiable lies and hypocrisy coming from MAGA Republicans at a time when we really can scarcely afford it, given that quite literally lives are on the line. So what she's talking about is this common Republican refrain that the reason that the disaster relief going on in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, the reason that it's still so complicated, the reason that it's still insufficient is because President Biden nefariously robbed Peter to pay Paul. He took funds out of the disaster relief fund from FEMA and put it in a separate fund so that FEMA could disperse it to undocumented migrants at the southern border. Total lie. Absolute lie, not ambiguous, complete 100% falsehood. And of course, there's irony here because Donald Trump actually did rob Peter to pay Paul when he was president, taking funds from congressionally appropriated disaster relief to apply it to the southern border. So the Washington Post goes into more detail. This is what Jessica Tarlov was talking about. The headline says, no, Biden didn't take FEMA relief money to use on migrants, but Trump did. Donald Trump falsely accuses President Biden of redirecting disaster funds, a budget maneuver Trump himself approved in 2019. So the quote is from Trump, the Biden-Harris administration says they don't have any money for hurricane relief. They spent it all on illegal migrants. They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants that they want to have vote for them. Of course, it's important to note that once again, it's been a matter of explicit federal law for more than 30 years. Non-citizens cannot vote, period. Trump has been trying to weaponize the Hurricane Helene relief efforts, accusing the Biden administration of failing to provide adequate assistance. As part of his critique, he claims there is no money available for hurricane relief because it was already spent to handle the surge of migrants at the southern border. Trump's claims have been echoed by his supporters, such as billionaire Elon Musk, but Trump is completely wrong. Even though Trump was once president, he appears to have little clue about the appropriations process. What's even richer is that when he was president, he did exactly what he claims Biden did, take money from FEMA's disaster fund to fund migrant programs at the southern border. FEMA is part of the Department of Homeland Security. On Wednesday, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told reporters, quote, we are meeting the immediate needs with the money we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. I think it's Hurricane Milton, as a matter of fact. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. He emphasized there was plenty of money to deal with the current disaster. Quote, we are meeting the moment. We have the immediate needs right now. On a continuing resolution, we have the funds, but that is not a stable source of supply, if you will. Congress, as part of a short-term spending bill, recently provided $20 billion to the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund. But Mayorkas noted, quote, that doesn't speak about the future and the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that these extreme weather events are increasing in frequency and severity, and we have to be funded for the sake of the American people. This is not a political issue, and indeed it isn't. In other words, Trump falsely claimed that there was no money left for Hurricane Helene survivors. That's the opposite of what Mayorkas said. Quote, FEMA has what it needs for the immediate response and recovery efforts, FEMA spokeswoman Jacqueline Rothenberg said on Twitter. As FEMA Administrator Diane Craswell said, she has the full authority to spend against the president's budget, but we're not out of hurricane season yet, so we need to keep a close eye on it. We may need to go back into immediate needs funding and we'll be watching it closely. So how does Trump link this to migrants? A Trump campaign spokesman pointed to FEMA's Shelter and Services Program, which gives grants to local governments and nonprofits to take care of undocumented migrants. Congress boosted the budget from $360 million in fiscal year 2023 to $650 million in fiscal year 2024. The program's 2023 annual report says it provides shelter, such as hotel and motel services, food and transportation, including plane tickets up to $700 a person. As we said, Congress appropriated this money just as it did the disaster fund. There's no evidence that any money from the disaster fund was used to help migrants. Quote, these claims are completely false. DHS said in a statement, as Secretary Mayorkas said, FEMA has the necessary resources to meet the immediate needs associated with Hurricane Helene and other disasters. The Shelter and Services Program, SSP, is a completely separate appropriated grant program that was authorized and funded by Congress and is not in any way associated with FEMA's disaster-related authorities or funding streams. Trump has a habit of assuming other politicians act the same way he would, so we wondered why he would accuse Biden of raiding the FEMA disaster fund to handle undocumented migrants. It turns out that's because he did this. In 2019, the Trump administration, in the middle of hurricane season, told Congress that it was taking $270 million from DHS programs, including $155 million from the disaster fund, to pay for immigration detention space and temporary hearing locations for asylum seekers who had been forced to wait in Mexico. Quote, the U.S. is facing a security and humanitarian crisis on the southern border, the administration said in its notice that it was redirecting the funds. That was the Trump administration in 2019. Also note that quote. So under the Trump administration, they admitted that they were facing a crisis at the southern border. I thought Donald Trump perfectly handled the southern border. I thought it was smooth as silk. It was flawless. Perfect. Pathetic. The monthly reports issued by FEMA Disaster Fund show $38 million was plucked and given to Immigration and Customs Enforcement in August that year, just before the prime storm period of September and October. The Trump campaign did not respond. So the reason we're bringing this up, folks, is once again, with MAGA Republicans as a general proposition, every accusation is a confession. They are projecting their own failures, their own decisions, their own choices onto the superior Biden-Harris administration as a way to try to politicize it as we rapidly approach the November election. It is a bold-faced lie. Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone is guilty of the sins that he is projecting onto President Biden. And it is up to Congress and Republican roadblocks in Congress to fund subsequent attempts to manage subsequent hurricanes like Hurricane Milton. So right now, 100%, literally all of the blame belongs to MAGA Republicans. They're holding this up. In the first clip I played, Jessica Tarlov mentioned something that she had to point out to the Five, right? She said, I just had to say this recently on the Five. So it's actually worth revisiting that Jessica Tarlov had to drop another fact check on some of her MAGA co-hosts on the Five. We actually did a video about this, but again, just for context, the fact that she's having to play whack-a-mole and knock these things down is worth noting. Here is another brutal fact check that she had to drop on MAGA, and I want you to note how little her colleagues care.
But I don't know if anyone else saw this today, what Politico was reporting. As usual with Trump, every accusation is a confession. They have two people who used to work for him in the White House told him that he wasn't going to release funds when the wildfires hit California because he didn't think that his supporters were there. So they had to show him voter data.
But that's Politico. They're a joke.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, they're a joke. They just did a whole article on body language of the debate saying Waltz's eyeballs gave you passion.
Okay, well, I want to...
Please stop.
Donald Trump had to be shown voter data that Orange County was solidly for Trump before he would release disaster relief funds. He even re-upped this in September earlier.
That's hearsay, Jessica.
No, it's not. It's reported in
a periodical that hates Trump and has lied about him for years. Let's go to Judge Jeanine Pirro.
So not only, obviously, did, again, Jesse Waters, Greg Gutfeld, the most stridently pro-Trump on that panel, just completely dismiss it and mock it and try to distract with jokes. Dana Perino, who's supposed to be the sanest of the Republicans on that panel, she didn't speak up and say, you know what, that's a really good point. We should probably criticize Donald Trump for that or temper our criticisms of the Biden administration, given that we're ranting to him about something he didn't do, but Trump, in fact, did. Pretty pathetic. Total silence, total abdication of any sort of journalistic credibility. But she is right. Jessica Tarlov is right. Again, members of the Trump White House revealed this information, including a natural disaster specialist in the Trump administration. So again, Donald Trump committed the very sin that he accused President Biden and Vice President Harris of doing, even though they're innocent and he is guilty, once again demonstrating his hypocrisy and moral inferiority. Last thing I want to touch on, though, is again, we have another hurricane rapidly approaching. It might, at the time of recording, already be in Florida, Hurricane Milton. So President Biden said, I just approved emergency declarations from the state of Florida and ordered federal assistance to supplement response efforts that may arise due to emergency conditions resulting from Hurricane Milton. We expect this storm to again make landfall in western Florida and are working quickly to pre-position federal response personnel and assets. So here's the reality. We're probably going to keep talking about this because it has been one of the most shameless enterprises for MAGA Republicans, blatantly lying about the very competent federal response from the Biden-Harris administration with respect to these hurricanes, despite being shackled and obstructed by MAGA Republicans in Congress. And I should say that the Republican governors of these red states have publicly praised the Biden administration's response. Anyone who tells you that the Biden-Harris administration has dropped the ball, or that they've robbed Peter to pay Paul, or that they're, taking funds for FEMA and sending it to Ukraine or Israel or the southern border, all of that is a lie. And these people deserve your contempt for spreading this lie at a time when lives are on the line. Pretty pathetic stuff. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.